Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Breaking the Blueprint with me, Vinay Parmar, and my co-host,
Iqbal, Javaid.
Today we have a very special guest with us who's sitting here looking quite awkward that we'll introduce you to in a second. But before we jump into meeting our guest, Iqbal, great episode last time with Sid, right?
Yeah,
what a great conversation.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I posted on LinkedIn recently. It's like two of my favorite topics, football, sports and CX, how these things come together. So it was really compelling around how, what fan loyalty means and what the whole concept around brand loyalty ties in very closely with that. I actually got a lot of stick last time from some of my friends who were listening. Said, look, you've got to support your team no matter what. Because we were a bit downbeat because of United. Obviously,
not after this weekend.
Well, yeah, exactly. So it's been a great couple. So since that episode, a lot's changed. So now my loyalty's back. I'm back in it.
You're back up spending in the shop and buying shirts and.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I guess in all honesty, just what I got out of the last episode was all around these sport organizations, they have all of the data that they need to be able to figure out what their customers or their fans need, and being able to deliver personalized services. I think that's really the next phase of what we want to be seeing as fans. Like I want more of a personalized service from my club that I support, that I invest in. I know they have the data. The next step is now I want to start seeing the fruits of the data that they have now. So,
yeah. It's funny. I saw a really great post on LinkedIn this morning by a guy who had done an experiment in a coffee shop, and he'd sat and observed people coming in and out. And his experiment was about, when do you greet people, when they come in through the door or when they get closer to you?
Yeah.
And he measured, I think, 41 customers that came in and out of the shop. And he said, when they were just welcomed in, as soon as they opened the door, the barista shouted, "Welcome." Only about 35% of the people actually acknowledged the barista. The rest were caught off guard. But when they got in closer proximity, and it was a specific communication, it went up to the high 70s to 80%. And it's interesting because I think there's this 10-foot theory that I think Edward T. Hall did around called Proximus, this theory about human proximity and how when we're closer to people and in closer proximity, there's the ideal distance, I think it's 10 foot.
Okay.
That creates a better connection. The reason I'm bringing that up is that there's almost a parallel there, which is going from broadcast, as in general messaging and general experience, to bringing it down to a much more personalized, intimate experience where you learn more about the customer and make it more relevant. So it's almost as if you're within 10 feet rather than you're just shouting from across the coffee shop.
It's a good point. Now, that's in a physical sense though, isn't it? And now we really see, if you're engaging your customers physically, that's fine. But actually you've got people right in front of you on screen. And that's where you can deliver these personalized experiences. And I think taking that approach, what you said, that 10-foot distance, you can take that across to all of your customer base, as long as you've got that connection into them digitally through either an app or your website.
Definitely. Yeah. So great episode. If you've not checked it out, please do. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, whichever platform you're watching on. Make sure you check out the episode with Sid Desai. It is really, really fascinating. Anyway, on to this week, or this month even, we have a very special guest with us, somebody that you and I both know pretty well. Welcome to the pod, Xander Freeman.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
It's so nice to see you both again. It's great to finally be on the podcast. We've been talking about it for a while.
Yeah.
It's good to finally be here.
Yeah. And in kind of sunny Birmingham, it's not raining, at least,
Well, I've got a funny story about Birmingham. So before I came, I live in London, of course. So before coming in, I thought, let me ask Siri what the weather in Birmingham is, and it told me it's 25 degrees, sunny. You know what's happened? It's given me the weather for Birmingham in the US. Now, you'd think Siri, my phone, would know where
Would
I
you
live.
really rather be in Alabama, though? Or would you rather be here?
Yeah, of course.
I lived in Birmingham for about 4.5 years. This is pretty on brand weather for it.
Yeah.
But still slightly better than Manchester.
Yeah.
And not only that, Xander, as we were talking, I discovered that you met your wife just a few feet away from this very studio.
Yeah, there is a bar just down the road where I met my wife a depressing amount of time ago now. But it was quite nice walking past it again.
Yeah. Good. Well, look, Iqbal and I both know you, but people listening or watching don't. So who are you and what do you do, Xander?
So my name is Xander Freeman. I am the director at Call Center Helper, where it's always one of those things where sometimes it's quite hard to describe what we are. Sometimes people call us a magazine. Sometimes they call us a publication. In essence, we're one massive website. I always say we're unofficially the largest online community of contact center professionals in the world. So it's a global audience of about 1.5 million unique readers every year on there, filled with best practice guides, articles, webinars, research, everything you could want if you're a contact center professional looking for some guidance in whatever niche subsect of this industry you're trying to get into.
Yeah, packed with lots of value. And sorry, a bit of background. How long has Call Center been going? Because I've been involved in contact centers for almost 30 years. And when you and I were talking, we met a little while ago, but until I'd met you, Call Center Helper wasn't a brand that I recalled as, oh, that's really synonymous with contact centers. But you've been around for a while, right?
23 years, just this August past. So yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things I always think we do a really good job of engaging with our audience that are on there. But sometimes one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast with you guys now is we put so much effort into some of our resources like this latest research. And I just feel like off camera, I describe it a little bit more harshly and use certain words that I won't use on camera. But we do sometimes do quite a poor job of actually promoting this research once we've gone through all the effort of it. This year's one is 85 pages, packed full of insights and data with expert analysis from 26 different leading customer contact experts, including you, to be fair.
Yeah.
So it's, we're an interesting one as a company, but everything we have is free to access. It's basically just we're positioned to try and make people's lives easy in what can be a very stressful environment.
Yeah. And all of us have had a journey in contact centers. I mean, you've been involved in contact centers.
Yeah, just obviously I come from a technical angle, working in technology, working for different vendors in this space. That's where we've kind of come across often. We've done a webinar together as well. So I like what you guys are about in terms of there's a lot of noise out there from vendors. There's a lot of publications that are just pretty much spitting out what the vendors are saying. I think on the ground it's very much different, and we'll obviously dig into this in our conversation today. Is actually the reality is a lot more different from what we see in the public domain around what all these different types of technologies. Obviously AI is a big part of it, but people on the ground, customers, they are really struggling to get a handle on what does this mean for us. There's a fear of missing out as well. Like we see technology advancing so much, our customers have certain expectations. How do we get there, and who do we trust? Who do we listen to? And I think this is where you guys can come in and play a really, really important role.
I think so. I always say it's one of those things where it's all really well and good where you're talking about it in theory and it's not actually on the ground and happening. In practice, it's two very different things. Yeah. And that's where I try and sort of help position CCH with our audience in the sense of, right, this is what people are saying, this is what we think is actually happening, and then this is what our audience is telling us. We do a ton of stuff by surveying our audience, constantly speaking to our audience as well, going to their contact centers in person as well, and seeing what they're doing, what key things to take away from that, and what other people can learn. It's all about learning from each other. And I think that's where the community aspect comes in really nicely.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked about research in the headline, and this episode is a deep dive into the world of contact centers because very much like you two, have been involved in it, as I said, for 30 years. I started my career as an agent, taking calls back in the day when your supervisor, when they were listening to your call, was actually plugged in, or worse still, you had a tape recorder plugged into the turret that was recording your call. That's how, don't let this beard fool you. There's a lot more grey there than the just
that guy's doing his job.
Yeah. So look, let's dive in because I'm really interested in what the research has found. So, from the top, what are the trends that have come out in this year's research?
So there's a few different directions to go with this. Let's start off with AI because everyone wants to talk about it. This year, we're seeing 90% of our audience have either adopted AI or in the process of adopting it as well, which is a big uptick from last year, as you would expect. But also, if you look at it and you break it down into sort of channel mix, chatbots are up to nearly 50% deployment, which I think is really interesting. That's actually the part of the research that you did the analysis on. I think when we talk about chatbots, it's part of me thinks it's the thing we love to hate. It's a very easy thing to punch down to, but I think when you deploy it in the right way and use it for the right circumstances and set it up correctly, it can actually be a very useful tool.
Yeah.
I also think if you look at, so our audience was, our research was done off the leaders within our community. And I often equate it to, how you can sometimes get a sort of hypochondriac doctor where they know too much. I say sometimes it's a little bit like that as well when it comes to chatbots, is what it could be. You experience it in your day-to-day life as well. I also think at the moment as well, it's one of those things where the bar gets set so high with customer experience these days by certain brands. You're compared to that rather than your competitors in a lot of different ways, because it could be a really challenging environment at the moment. And then sort of to take a step back on the trends, we're seeing more, we've seen a huge surge in searches on our site for sort of face-to-face activities, which I think is a consequence of the sort of return to work hybrid approach that most contact centers are starting to take again these days. In some ways, it's nice to see some of those searches cycle back. There's some really good advice on CCH around those things. But it's interesting that that's come up a lot more in the research, as much as we want to talk about AI and we want to talk about tech.
But that's a reality, isn't it? I'm certainly seeing it at the moment. There's a big push to get people back into offices and get offices filled up. But the rationale behind it doesn't quite make sense, because actually the technology's enabled us now to be able to have a distributed contact center environment and actually have more of a global presence as well, very easily, right? You're not restricted by geography anymore. But yet we're still seeing, and I'm seeing a real push by senior management to get people back into the office, particularly in call center environment where you want to see people. But why? When you've got access to so much insight.
Yeah, and I think the why is the important question. Because I think that if you look at it in the simplicity of, I can do the role that I do in the office, sat there from home, just as effective. That's one part. But I think what we're now starting to kind of better understand is two or three things. One, there's a lot of conversation about culture and the importance of culture in driving the experience for customers, for employees. And, as much as you would like to think you can, it's very difficult to create a cohesive culture when people are always remote, when there's not any
culture for sure.
So I think the second thing is the purpose of coming to the office for. If they're just coming to the office to do the job they could have done at home, particularly those people in back office that could, grind out reports, do some of their work at home, then you're kind of defeating the object. And actually, but if you get them in and it's more about collaboration, looking at working together, solving problems, there's a different purpose to being in the office. I think that's part of the conversation as well. But for the contact center, when in the research, I think I talked about this in the piece that I did with Call Center Helper, was one of the unspoken things is the impact it has mentally on people being at home a lot, particularly where, talking about chatbots and self-service, where some of those easy calls, or most of those easy calls that as an agent you used to get in your day will be spread out through your day. You're now just almost getting a queue of angry customers or frustrated customers in complex queries, one after the other. Now, if you're lucky enough to have a dedicated space in your home that you can shut the door off, walk downstairs or walk into another room, brilliant, you've got a separate space. But so many agents I see are working in their kids' bedroom, in their bedroom, on the dining table. But and the psychological impact of that is it creates a negative anchor. So if you're constantly sitting in this chair dealing with negative customers because there's always a problem, that becomes an emotional weight. So then when you're having your dinner or you're in that room for another purpose, that negative
there's no separation.
There's no separation, right?
It's also quite isolating as well. But I also think when you're talking about that sort of thing as well, you've got the demographic shift as well, right? Look at the average age of a frontline worker in, let's just say, customer service in general. You're coming on 5 years now. Well, we are 5 years. I always forget how long ago 2020 was. 5 years now from when people really started embracing remote working. Now, if we start putting in return to office mandates, you've got people that might not have ever actually worked in an office before coming in, which it covers a whole host of different problems when you have that as well. So there's so many different elements to take into account. It's overwhelming.
And people that have relocated and moved to different parts of the country because they, they believe they'll be able to continue to work. So, but there's a whole other podcast here about culture.
Just on that, I do want to touch on the chatbot bit that you mentioned there. Obviously, that from a chatbot perspective, this has been around for years now, right? Not much has changed there. I think what I'm seeing now, speaking to a lot of organisations, is yes, they still want to look at chatbot where there's an opportunity to introduce it, but voice bots just gone crazy. Every vendor is trying to shove voice bots down every customer that they have that has a front end voice service. Let's get a voice bot in there. What's your view on that?
I think It's also voice AI is a really interesting subsection of contact centers at the moment, or let's say customer contacts at the moment. From one perspective, it's a relatively straightforward startup and realistic use case for AI at the moment. If you look at what a company like, let's say 11 Labs, from a voice AI perspective, there's so many different things you can do with that. You can create a voice clone of yourself, which I know certain people have done. You've got so many different regional dialects on there. If you look at some of the empathy they're trying to inject into that, it's quite new and it's exciting. I think when it's done right, it could be really useful. I think the key thing there from an end user perspective is getting those escalation protocols right. It's also make it very clear at the beginning of that conversation, look, I am AI. This. Make it very clear what you can and can't do with it to your audience. And it builds in that level of trust. I think voice AI will continue to become more popular. It instantly jumped from nowhere to, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, somewhere between 5 to 10% deployment in this year's survey.
It's been big.
It will continue to be so. And I think that's from two fronts, not only from a technology perspective in terms of it will continue to improve, but also from a customer behavior perspective, how they react to this kind of thing. At the moment, you've got a Marmite effect of love it or hate it. It's similar with chatbots. It depends how you deploy it.
And that kind of experience that customers have in their own daily lives is important because many of them will have voice assistants, Siri, Amazon, if you've managed to get a Google device in your home, one of those. But also, you're seeing increasingly people when they're engaging with things like ChatGPT using voice and having full-blown conversation. So we're getting more and more used to talking to technology or something that's not a real human. The bit that really is important here is the design and where it's designed from. And it's still, I think, the case that a lot of chatbots are designed for efficiency and internal metrics and not designed from the perspective of
the customer.
And we're coming on this podcast on the back of the AWS outage the other day, the global cloud service. And I'm a big user of Canva. I love Canva. And I was trying to use it and download it and I couldn't. So I hit the AI chatbot. This is before I knew about that it was a global thing. I was just on there in the morning. And I was trying to chat to this chatbot, which beautifully says, hi, I'm here to help you. What can I do for you? I can't access my documents. Oh, here's a help article. Like, no, I can't access my documents. Can I speak to a human? Don't understand. Speak to support? Don't understand. Help desk? Don't understand. Connect me to a human? Don't understand. And then I'm there, not knowing what's going on. And this thing just seems
frustrating you.
And so many of that. And the irony being is that in a world where we were driven to AI and talking about AI, many of us still have PTSD from really bad chatbot experiences that even when it's presented as an option, we probably wouldn't use it.
Take it back to the Microsoft paperclip. It's a lovely sort of first steps of what most people, if you really think about it, it's like, oh yeah, that did used to really ag me off. Now I think you could call it retro, to be fair.
You just pop up when you didn't want it and give you advice that didn't help. So great. So chatbots are a big point of query. Talked about face-to-face and that. Anything else that's showing up in your research that's useful to surface?
I think there's a few different routes you could take there. WFM technology uptake has continued to rise. We've been doing this research now for, I think, 14 years in a row. So if you take it back 10 years, WFM technology adoption was about 30%. Now we're at close to, I think, 65 off the top of my head. So it's interesting to see that continue.
That's quite a big number, actually, 65. I'm quite surprised. But is that, I guess, how big are we looking in terms of seats? Contact center seats, is that over 100?
It entirely varies with our audience. That's the thing. As much as we filter it by sort of leaders within that, it's such a broad mix of seat sizes, verticals as well within that. But I do think WFM's rise is synonymous with what we're talking about today in some cases, which is the sort of power of data as well. This WFM, I always think, is quite a useful mindset into how to use data internally within your teams to sort of better organize them and all the other benefits that you can talk about with WFM. But then also, obviously, later today, we're going to be talking about how to use that internally within your wider organization and from a customer perspective. But I think the rise of WFM, you can equate similar levels to the general industry at the moment with AI adoption and use cases that people are trying to deploy at the moment.
Yeah, I think traditionally the problem with WFM's been like in traditional contact centers, like every row of agents, you've had somebody at the end of that desk managing those agents on a WFM spreadsheet or whatever. And now you've got AI being able to manage it, people being able to manage their own times.
Look at the advances in sentiment analysis. I did one of my dissertations was in sentiment analysis and consumer behavior.
Okay.
Again, depressing amount of time ago now, back at uni, but it's still light years ahead these days of where we were back then.
Yeah, that's true.
It's also, like I say, just really quickly circling back to voice AI and a couple of other components. One of the things I really love at the moment is the language transitions you can have with that kind of thing now makes a world of difference. And the advancements they've made in regional dialect detection. I can have a conversation. So I'm fortunate enough where I can speak English and Portuguese pretty fluently. I can flip mid-sentence into Portuguese and it will follow the conversation. As long as it's been set up to do that, it will follow it pretty well. And if you look at where we were 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's light years ahead.
And it's not just the technology in contact centers starting to do that. If you start thinking about like Apple in their latest set of AirPods, the new version, you've got like live translation.
I tried that the other day. It failed miserably. I was actually on a call with some Spanish people, and I had the Zoom translation on, and I thought, oh, let me try this. So I had the audio output from my laptop, and I tried the AirPod thing, and it was detecting some words, but no, I can't have a conversation. Like it's not. I mean, they're selling this dream and this vision. Maybe you'll get there in a couple of years, but that real time translation, it's
not quite there.
It's not there yet.
All three of us have relatively difficult to understand names from an AI perspective, which is always the litmus test I use and have continued to use for my entire life when it comes to auto transcriptions. iOS device.
AI just thinks I'm some kind of Italian gangster because it just references as Vinny Parmar.
You do give off that vibe, to be fair, outside of the studio.
True, especially when you've got your suit on.
My iOS devices at the moment will auto transcribe my name into 3 different things. One is Santa, which is not the worst thing in the world. One is Panda, which is not too bad. The third one is Cancer, which is horrific compared to the other 2.
That's not good.
We'll stick to Santa, shall we? Christmas not far now, so
it's on theme. It's all good, But it does make my team's life a little bit interesting. We're doing the live event coverage, and they're having to transcribe it really quickly. There's so much work they have to do.
For sure.
So conversational voice AI is more and more coming to the fore. More and more people use it. I guess it also from an accessibility perspective, it's easy to talk to something that needing to type, needing to get access to a keyboard. I imagine even in situations where it's an emergency, having to pull out your phone and tap a message or get through something, just being able to speak to it from across the room even.
Well, let's look at it from a digital channel perspective. There's so much ambiguity in the written word as well relative to what you're detecting when someone's speaking. So if you look at different channels like email, chatbot, what have you, it's how do you detect sentiment in that way? And again, we've made some really good advances, but it's also one of the things from our data which was what are you monitoring there from an agent perspective? And communication and empathy came up right near the top of that, which is really nice to see. Obviously, compliance is a very easy win there, so that took the top spot there. But it was really interesting to see empathy really come to the foreground there, even in digital channels, which can be a little bit challenging sometimes to really detect that.
Now, one of the things when we talk about contact centers that's been a theme probably for the last couple of decades is there's been this drive of contact center from cost center to value center. They're often misunderstood in organizations. And I think there's an opportunity now to actually finally be able to flip that model on its head and really create a value center. And I know you and I have talked about this, but just on contact centers being misunderstood, are they still misunderstood? Do companies still see them as this unfortunate cost of doing business that sits in the corner somewhere that's the poor relation to the rest of the business?
I think so. I think some of that stems from the general public at large. Take our name as call center helper. Say call center to someone on the street and you know what they're going to get into their heads there. And I think you can look at it from the evolution of call center to contact center to, let's say, customer experience there. But I almost think the step beyond that, and I think where we'll eventually end up as an industry, is going to be customer contact. Because I think that is broad enough where it covers a whole scope of digital channels as well as the traditional ones within that. But it's a clean slate in a lot of ways for the general public. Now, I think if you push that back onto the organization in general, we've spent almost the entirety of the, let's say, contact center's existence going cap in hand asking for budgets. And I think for the first time that I've certainly been aware of, we're actually in a position of power which is really nice. And as much as we want to talk about it being a value center, I almost think you go a step further. It's an insight center.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially if you look at the senior team, they're going to be under pressure as well to innovate in the right ways. Everyone wants to get involved in AI in some way because it's just the climate at the moment. Where does all that data come from? It's the contact center.
Yeah.
It's 100% the contact center.
Yeah.
Finance don't have that data. Marketing don't have that data. The senior teams, the C-suite teams don't have that data. You guys do.
Yeah. One of the first speaking gigs I did when I went freelancing, I flew over to Dubai to do a contact center conference there. And my bit was all about the gold in your contact center. It was all about understanding that, you know, the value of the call recordings that you have. I mean, all these contact centers start with your call will be recorded for monitoring and training purposes. Many of them monitoring, yes. Training, I don't know whether they actually do to the degree that they could. But what I was talking about there was that there's so much insight in those conversations because look, you know, when we're trying to drive innovation in organizations, often the intelligence for that comes from a survey or some kind of research that is polarizing. You either get really great experience or really poor experience. You either get certain segments speaking about it. And what just looking at contact center and the volume of calls you're getting, if you're getting 30,000 calls a week or something like that versus a 1 to 2% response rate on a survey, not only are you getting a greater sample size, but you're also getting the nuanced conversation because not every conversation is, it was really great, it was really poor. You're getting the nuanced conversation where somebody's just calling to do something quite routine, but within that conversation, there are clues and bits of insight that tell you about the next steps down.
We are in a post contact survey world these days, I think, and that's quite a key thing. It's if you look at how we used to do VOC and how we used to get that data, it was always very reactive to stuff.
Yeah.
And look at who would fill out those surveys. It's like you say, it's very much either end of the spectrum.
Exactly. You've got AI now doing a lot of CSATs now for a lot of these organizations. But just going back to the cost center piece, I think it depends. You can't label all call centers, obviously, right? I'm working with an organization and they're all sellers. For that business, they're the most important people within that business. They're handling inbound leads, they're doing outbound calling, and they're willing to invest a lot per seat across technology because these guys are the revenue drivers.
Right.
So that's a different type of contact center for me. Right?
And I think, and it's a great point because I think traditionally that journey from cost center to value center has been, how do we generate revenue?
Exactly.
In sales, cross sales, upsell, whatever. Yeah. And I think where Xander's taken to, and certainly what I've been talking about a lot is the insight hub. Actually, the commodity you have as a contact center to sell into the rest of the organization is really great insight that improves decision making across multiple disciplines, pricing, commercial, digital
marketing
product development.
Well,
Marketing's such a good use case for it.
You almost, the opportunity here is to place yourself as the contact center, the insight hub at the center of the organizations that's selling to the rest of the organization insight and intelligence that helps them to make better decisions.
But the key thing is, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And I almost think you need to look at it from a sort of double-ended approach. Yes, you've got to sell it to the C-suites, which I'll get onto in a minute, but you've also got to sell it to your team members as well. This is why we're doing it. Bring them along in the journey as well.
Yeah.
We've seen that done to great effect in several contact centers that we visited.
I think what was worked really well in certain places where I've seen people create CX councils across different disciplines within an organization. So you mentioned all the different areas. You've got leadership across those areas coming together with the people that are managing the contact center. Once they start to share some of the pain points and things that are happening in the organization, they realize actually all the gold is sat with the contact center. And then it's kind of tying those dots together, isn't it?
It's absolutely that. And that's the role of the CX leader, is they are the person who orchestrates those relationships, who creates that collaboration. You know, I was talking to Martin Hill Wilson, who some of you may know, and he and I have been chatting about this topic a lot. And we were talking about the team of teams, that in the military, there's this thing where you take your best people from certain military teams and you bring them and you put them into other teams, or you centralize them, having cross-collaborative groups where you have representation from different teams.
Cross-pollinating.
It's cross-pollinating. The key here is co-location, bringing more people together from disparate parts of the organization to start to share intelligence, to talk to each other about problems, about what they're trying to find out, and then looking at the sources of where you can get that information and data from to improve the decision making across those different places, right?
But the key thing is within that, like we talk a lot about silos within contact centers, but when we talk about that, we're mainly talking team to team within the contact center.
Yeah.
Contact centers themselves are a nasty silo within that.
Yes.
As in we all talk in our own acronyms.
Yeah.
We tend to stay within the industry as well, which is nice in some ways, but also from a cross-pollination perspective, it could be a little bit difficult. But I also think like the role of that CX leader is, I've often termed it to be the Rosetta Stone in your organization, is how do you translate this insight and these terms to the different departments? What CFO really cares about your AHT? Really? I know it makes a difference on there, and we're not saying do away with AHT, but translate it to them. If it's a CFO, put it into real pounds or real dollars.
Yeah.
If it's marketing, put it into something that matters for them. Like, sorry.
No, completely. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but exactly that. Translate it into what does that really mean? Things like translating that, every 30 seconds that's additional on a call because the system's not working cost this in terms of seats, or missed sales opportunity, or any of those things, right through to conversion. Something broken on a website affects a conversion, therefore you're leaving money on the table because customers can't transact. But if you're not talking in those terms, you don't get the traction. And I think that too often in our industry and customer experience or contact center or call center, whatever you call it, there's far too much conversation about, well, it affects customer satisfaction or the NPS will go up. And the question is always, well, so what?
I think things are improving though. I think now we did the episode around metrics, didn't we, a few months ago, and we talked about all of these metrics that the traditional metrics that we've always measured success against. Now that we are able to provide data that can impact marketing, the way we are servicing our customers and everything else, we can now take that to that next level and really help.
I think so. And I think, like I said, let's focus on marketing for a second because it's such an easy use case for it. This sort of thing's been happening to contact centers for decades now. Marketing, let's take it back to the 90s. Marketing would do a traditional postal mailing and look at the impact that would have on your call volumes. Them not telling you that would screw over your team.
Yeah.
That law has now shifted where the opposite could be happening, is in the sense of, look, we've got the data you want. You've got a limited amount of marketing spend. We know where it will be applied better. We know what will resonate. Just have that conversation, cross-pollinate it to the other side.
But I would argue you shouldn't need to have a conversation. The data's there. It should surface itself. It should all be automated, and it should just present itself to the marketing team, right? Like, I understand what you're saying. You're still relying on people to perform that task and generate those reports and make a business case for it.
But isn't that just the nature of the world, though? Like, so much of our stuff, again, makes sense in an idyllic contact center there, but the practice is, does it actually happen?
And I don't think it works like that. I think you can have all the pretty dashboards you want in the world. I mean, just take, most of us have wearable technology, right? You're measuring your heart rate, your steps rate. How regularly are you actually using that data to make change in your life? It's there. You look at your activity rings closing, you look at how many steps you've taken, take notes of it. In the same way, the data is just the data. It still needs a storyteller to translate it from data into insight and influence to drive change in your organization. And that's the thing. How do you take it off the page? Because look, when you're in a boardroom and you're sat there and you're thumbing through the pages of a 200-page board report, and there's a table in there that says these are the top 10, these are the 5 calls, top 5 calls, top 5 complaint reasons. You skip through and that's what you think's happening, but it's the nuance beneath that and what's actually happening that really should be driving the conversation about, well, so what then? Why are people calling for this reason, that reason? Is that really the reason? And what's driving that? And so I think, but that only happens when you can take it off the page. There's nothing as powerful as playing real calls in front of senior execs. When you play it, they not only get the reason for the call, but they feel the emotion and the power in when customers calling. And if that's one customer, you multiply by the amount that could be doing that, and suddenly there's a change. The other thing that I was going to say about the insight thing as well is I think that there has been, the irony about the whole thing is that it's often the contact center that's tasked with reduce your call volumes. but the contact volumes or the call volumes aren't being driven by the contact center.
They're not off providing the service.
Yeah.
It's the business.
They're just dealing with what the business is spitting out.
We're an easy punching bag.
Yeah.
Always have been.
Yeah.
And it's just, this is, in as much as we talk about the sort of AI era, this is the first time that, again, that I'm aware of where we've actually got the capabilities, or at least the core resources, to actually push back on that a lot more and start to shift that narrative.
So let talk to me a bit more about that, because that kind of insight, moving towards resolution, talking about it in ROI terms. What case studies are you seeing? What examples have you come across in the research or in the people that you're working with that gives you that confidence to say, we're now seeing this for the first time and the power's shifting?
There's a ton we could use there. I'll focus on one. I won't name the company, but let's just say private healthcare provider in the UK. And one name usually springs to mind for something like that. What they're doing is really interesting if you look at some of their outbound stuff. So they would have a situation where basically they were getting a load of inbound calls coming in, being very reactive to it, like people wanting to cancel their subscription to it, or not wanting to renew, for instance. Now what they're doing is they're deploying AI in a way whereby they're monitoring the warning signs for someone who's at risk of not renewing, and then being a bit more proactive with them. It's a more unified approach using their technology and their data in the right way. Now I appreciate that's a very small sample size and a very small or very specific example, but ultimately that's the one that always springs to my mind, in the sense of this is what you could be doing. And it's not a one size fits all situation. No one's asking you to, well, I mean, some people might be, but no one should be asking you to revolutionize everything you're doing in your contact center today. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Focus on those small wins there.
And so, yes, there are more and more instances of AI be using it in a more proactive way. I think that's certainly a shift that I'm noticing, much more of at least a desire to be more proactive and less reactive.
Yeah, and I think like customer retention is such an easy example to give there. Most people will be aware of the old statistic of, it's a lot easier to keep a customer than to gain a new one by X percentage or whatever. But ultimately, I think that's one that will instantly resonate with several different departments in your organization and instantly prove the value of what you're doing.
And I think that shift is now taking that contact center into a value center is with the emergence of AI, because that's a great example of something that will reduce churn, drive more revenues. So there's a clear ROI path for ROI. But I think as well as that, and maybe we'll touch on this, is the whole concept around agents is changing the way, a lot of organizations. I've been working with a BPO who now refers to their agents as experts, because actually they've got access to a lot of good knowledge now and the right data to be able to serve your customers the first time. Like they are adamant on solving that customer's problem on that first call. Like that's the metric that they go by, that they run by. And that's because they've got the experts who have access to everything they need to be able to serve that customer. And that's a combination of AI and other things.
But the key thing with that is when we're talking about first contact resolution, FCR, it's about making sure that you're tracking that metric in the right way in a digital world, right? Some people I've seen will be tracking FCR in the sense of, they went through here, and here, but we ended up sorting them. Is that really first contact resolution when it goes through so many different channels to end up eventually at an agent who does solve it in that first instance? You still, and again, like look at the pressure you're putting on the agent there. Imagine how, I'm going to keep this PG, emotionally charged the customer would be at that point, having been bounced around X, Y, and Z to eventually get to someone. Yeah, it could be difficult.
Yeah, I do think the AI conversation is laced still with a lot of hype and a lot of this is the panacea, this is the beautiful future you could be in. And we'd love to be in a world here where those interactions happen, where first contact resolution happens. And for a lot of routine transactional things, that can absolutely be the case. But I still think that the power of AI is the empowerment and the enablement of the human to solve problems better right now. And I think the other thing, your point earlier about we're not kind of transforming anything. Just look at the amount of change happening in organizations where it just doesn't happen, doesn't get completed, programs falter, change doesn't get delivered, there's more and more pressure. So we've got this stimulus that says we've got this technology, hey, let's change everything and we can really do great stuff. But our capacity for change and our ability to change are almost in direct opposition to what's being presented. And I saw a great post by Matt Watkinson, who wrote 10 Principles of Customer Experience. Really great book. And one of the points Matt made in there was talking about, look, if you look in an organization, just raising a PO just getting 2 or 3 teams to do something is so much hard work.
Yeah.
Than actually expecting organizations to see this opportunity in technology and all of a sudden grab it and just put it into everything. That's a fairy tale. I think it will be still gradual adoption.
Yeah.
And I think there are still hurdles to come and things that we've got to navigate that we're not even talking about to the level that we need to.
But that's the key thing, though, is it's breaking it down into those areas where you can actually see a little bit more of a tangible difference right now. Let's take some traditionally static areas of contact centers or niches of contact centers. Let's take QA, for instance, something that was seen as very stable, very what it's going to be. It's very heavily compliance-based. Taking that back 3 years. Now, look at it now when you've got some of the capabilities you can do right now with auto QA. I will say it's important to get that right in the sense of if you gave someone the option of, right, would you rather have data on 3% of your calls or 99% of your calls? Who wouldn't want the 99%? The distinction there is, would you rather have 3% done correctly?
By humans.
Exactly. Or 99% done, it's okay. That's the key distinction to make is don't just try and throw it in for the sake of throwing it in and do it poorly. Take the time to get it right.
I think you can blend the two approaches, though, can't you? Because whilst that 99% or 90% will give you a bit of a trend around what's actually going on, you can then drill into specifics. And one of the things, I was doing just a recent sample exercise around some QM data, and we were looking at top 5 trends. And one of the things that we detected was call transfer was being mentioned a lot. Like a lot of conversations were being transferred across different agents, and now we're drilling into what the reasons behind that is. But we were easily able to detect all the conversations where that was mentioned, bring up those conversations, get AI to summarize what's going on, tell me loosely why so many calls are being transferred, and AI has given us an answer to that question. It's because the intent of the customer wasn't detected well enough to be able to route to the right person. We've gone and solved that, and that's fixed that problem very, very easily. And that's looking at the data across, I think it was about 30,000 calls within a space of 5 days. So that's the power of it. Traditionally, it would take forever to be able to work something like that out.
It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. You wouldn't get there quick enough. And just on that point, because we kind of, we talked a bit about the CFO conversation and the value center and that kind of thing. But we're just moving into the kind of world of AI. So we'll just circle around there a little bit. When we were talking and just prepping for this podcast, you used a really interesting phrase to me: first movers versus first losers.
Yeah.
Do you want to let's dive into that, because I thought that was a really interesting insight.
Yeah, I'm someone that likes to stay positive for the most part, but I also think as much as we're looking at the moment where we're at with near the tail end of 2025, there's some really interesting use cases at the moment in the sense of we have a whole host of them on our website in terms of this is what's done well, this is when Equally, the other side of that coin is so important and does not get talked about enough because people do not want to dwell on those failures. It's important to learn from them. Take Klarna as a lovely example of their CEO going, right, we're doing this, we're firing all these people, and then look at what happened with it. Take, do I want to term him as a first loser? Take Sam Altman. With OpenAI, look at some of the comments he made about customer service in general recently. Like, obviously, look, it's in his best interest to say those things for his stock price and all that stuff. However, I think it often gets overlooked. Of look at what can go wrong and learn from that as well. It's not just imagine a perfect scenario where this is how it goes right. It's so important to look at what's gone wrong as well. And I appreciate. Look, it's hard to get people to talk about that. It's something we're trying to do a little bit more at the moment with Call Center Helper. Is analyze those stories where it's gone wrong, not naming names in it by any means, but it's a case of, right, this is equally as important as the perfect examples of how it goes right. It's the other side of that coin that historically just does not get talked about enough.
Well, exactly. I mean, you can go through and experiment yourself and learn from your own failings, but learning from other cases and outside is just equally important. And going back to the change conversation, that's part of the process of how do we navigate some of those mistakes that other people have made, and do that. And I think there is that, because instinctively it's always a first move is a good place to be. You're first in the technology, you're first in that. But I think actually in this case maybe it's not the best place to be, because of the pace at which AI is changing and technology is changing. And B, we haven't done everything figured out.
No, we haven't. But I also think that there's the Klarna example is a great one, right? they decided to move away from Salesforce, save millions a year because they're adopting more of an AI approach, and obviously the people side of things, they're reversing those decisions. You could argue that actually that sometimes you've just got to be the first one, right, to be able to try things. And yes, you fail, as long as you're self-aware enough to figure out, actually, this hasn't worked, so we're going to reverse this. But that's okay. Like, so what? I mean, at least that they've been brave enough to make.
Yeah, well, it's also going in bite-sized steps, though, right? As in, that's the key thing I think with the Klarna one is, look, you can have that conversation about, right, first one through the breach and all that, but ultimately, I think with something like Klarna, look at the drastic decision they made immediately, which seemingly came from senior leadership, and look at the consequences it had on that.
I think so, yeah, I do agree. I've got another example of, I think I've mentioned this organization before, it's about 100 contact center staff. They decided to go down to 5 and just adopt a chat bot and a voice bot, and they went very aggressive. Within a 12-month period, they got rid of their staff and just kept it very minimal. They realized the nuance behind a lot of the queries that were coming in. They didn't really look at the data beforehand, and now they're backtracking. They're having to rehire half of their workforce, so they're still at 50% in the end. They went through a lot of pain. The customers felt the pain. You could argue it could have a long-term impact on brand, loyalty, all of these things. But they jumped right in, quickly realized it's not working, and now they've backtracked. So I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer here.
This is where things like test and learn, and you just adopting that A/B split test mentality,
exactly.
and trying it out in a small scale, figuring out the thing, and slowly. Like, nobody's saying what Klarna were proposing wasn't a possibility. Right. But actually, and I don't know them, I don't know what they did and whether they even did this, but looking from the outside in, like testing it out in a small in a small volume and slowly growing it out, so you gradually get to that point. It's not it's a marathon, not a sprint.
I mean, let's look at another example outside of the contact center space directly, but look at Duolingo when they started pushing all the AI stuff. And that's a really interesting example, actually. I know, it's so funny. But it's a really interesting example because it's slightly outside of customer contact, but if you look at it from a customer loyalty perspective, Duolingo was a brand that had a lot on the surface. If you look at their social strategies, their way to go to market, it's very surface level, very emotively driven with the crazy bird or whatever you want to call it. Look at the backlash to it there as well.
Incredible. Just the employees as well. And this just shows the power of employees, the culture within an organization. They built the business with that ethos around, helping the world learn more languages. And the people that are working for that organization really believe that. So when the CEO suddenly comes and says, actually, we've got to start thinking about making money now, it just completely backfired on him. Like, his own people stood up against it. Like, what do you mean we have to make? We're not here to make money. We're here to help people. And it's like, I'm here to run a business. So, you maybe they kind of shifted that too soon, and they should have taken their time. But
but again, it's so difficult with something like language as well. As much as we talked about earlier, like again with the advances in virtual AI at the moment, again in translation as well. You have to get it right because people, again, with something like that, people know what they're on about on the other side of that coin, and you can get called out very quickly if you do it wrong.
I mean, catastrophic consequences. I mean, imagine you're in some kind of world summit and 2 world leaders are using AI to translate, like just a turn of phrase, the wrong thing translated, and suddenly you can be into some really hot water.
Well, even in the same quote unquote language, the distinctions between, I'll use a personal example, European Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese, the same word can mean 2 very different things. Quinta is farm in one and Thursday in another. It's just small distinctions.
Exactly. So there's a way to go. But I mean, and that kind of takes us to, like, I was, who was I talking to? I think I was at a conference last week or the week before, a sort of a networking event, and there was a great presentation about AI. And one of the things that came out was AI needs leadership too. You've got to look at AI agents, not as clever tech, but clever team members, experts to your reference. But they need onboarding, they need training, they need guardrails, they need clear job descriptions and all of those things in order for them to be effective. So just as they do, so do agents and real human agents. So I guess the segue I was kind of taking us towards were just touching on humans and agents working in there. How is that evolving?
The easiest way I can describe that is probably the terminology that I tend to use these days. It's going from agents to something more akin to advisors. And I think if you look at the role of the modern contact center advisor, it is vastly different from what it was 20 years ago. the easy example that people tend to use, and a lot of the tech vendors will talk about this as well, and a lot of the actual end users, if you go to conferences and see them speak on stage, they will say similar terminology. The complex tasks are being given to agents or now advisors or what have you. The easy tasks, the A to B, is being given through chatbots or self-service or what have you to digital representatives, not humans. And what does that leave the human with? The emotionally charged ones that are difficult to do, and you're losing your, what I used to term in breathers, like you were saying earlier, the easy ones. It was like, okay, I know what I'm doing here. This is an easy one. No one's swearing at me. It's nice. It's okay. I can do this. You're losing those, and look at the effect it has on the actual human agent there. And look at, like I say, I mentioned the demographics earlier. Look at your frontline agents. Look, I mean, they tend to be on, let's not mince words, you know, on a lower end of the salary spectrum of an organization. They tend to be either fresh graduates or people coming in or what have you. There's a lot of pressure to put on those people. And if you don't get your training right as well, that just adds to that. The modern agent, in the scenario where the easy tasks have all gone or are disappearing, is asked to be a combination of a brand advocate, an advisor, in some cases when we're talking about heavy compliance industries, a therapist as well in a lot of ways. And I think it's important to remember when you're talking about these actual people, in a lot of ways, I think sometimes we're asking machines to do the job of humans and humans to do the job of machines, which is a difficult balance to make in a tricky situation.
The point empathy is huge. And I think empathy is a skill. You know, for years in customer service training, you teach people to smile as you dial, talk, you know, all of this kind of stuff to make people feel good. And for those transactional routine things, how much difference does it make? Arguable. It makes difference. I believe that it does. But actually in those complex situations, the ability to empathize, to understand, to humanize, and connect with an individual, it is massive. Because, you know, from the stuff that I talk about and memory and how that drives it, those customer experiences that stand out in your mind from the brands that you deal with often happen when you are in a highly emotive state, either really stressed, really happy. They tend to lock into your neural networks because those experiences wire together. You are already in a heightened state of emotion. What happens, sticks, is recalled. So if you have a disaster in that, for example, say you have a really bad experience of travel disruption and you're at a particular airport with a particular airplane, all of that is associated with that memory. You will not use that airline. You'll probably want to avoid that airport, whatever it is. But if they have a really great experience, it's the other way around, because in that heightened state of emotion, you're doing it. And so the point about empathy is the ability, you know, in those situations, that empathy skill and those soft skills that we call them, that are harder to learn, but weirdly we call them soft skills, become really important.
They do, but do you think the empathy comes into play because that person dealing with your request isn't able to solve your problem, so they're having to be that therapist, be the person who has got to offer that empathy because they can't actually solve your problem right now, when actually, if you give that advisor access to the right tools, i.e. actually just as you connect into me or as we start to engage, I've got a sense of where you are based on your journey with us, your sentiment, the problems you're having, and the second we speak, actually, Vinay, I know your problem, and this is how I'm going to solve your problem.
And I think yes and no, linked to what we said earlier on about data and insight. In the same way, you can present all the information you want to the agent, but if they don't have the ability to stitch them together and have the conversation, because at a human level, what we really want to know is to know that we matter, that we're being seen, that somebody cares, and yes, you can pop up all the information and give them all the tools, but they still need a skill to do it. Now, the other side of that coin, or the parallel bit that I would add to what you said, and you touched on it early on with the clients you're working on, is just remembering as an agent, sometimes it was like you had the deck of the Starship Enterprise in front of you with the number of screens you had. And then if you've now got another thing flashing up to say, hey, use me, I've got some insight, that's got to be taken into it, because you're asking me to assimilate all of this information.
It's a cognitive load.
And cognitive load, right? To be able to do something with it. So how do we balance let's give agents these bits of prompting, but also let's reduce the amount of the other stuff.
Well, that's the thing, though, and it comes back to, it's not necessarily a technological issue there. It mixes in the role of training, agent empowerment within that as well, employee engagement. And the result, it's such a complicated mix.
Yeah, and knowledge as
different
well.
ones.
Making sure knowledge is up to speed, right? I mean,
Oh,
that's a
I
whole...
can go on like a 10-minute rant on this if you want. It drives me absolutely nuts that so many people want to talk about AI at the moment, but no one wants to talk about knowledge management.
That's the hardest part.
I know.
Well, let's talk about it, Xander.
Yeah.
You know, you've teed it up nicely. Let's
Yeah.
talk about knowledge management. Yeah. What's your soapbox moment?
Bugbear.
Soapbox moment on there.
I'm not going to swear here either because I'm going to keep it PG. Basically, it absolutely drives me nuts. I appreciate it's not the sexiest topic in the world, right? And it's not something that can just be one and done. It needs constant upkeep. But like you were saying earlier, Vinay, around AI, treating like a virtual AI or voice AI, what have you, as a human agent that needs training, that needs upkeep, that needs to be checked in on. It's that kind of approach. And where that starts is knowledge management. You can look at a whole host of different ways that people have tried to deploy AI and got it wrong. A lot of the cases, it comes down to, I mean, I'll do the version of this where I don't swear. You put rubbish into an LLM, you're going to get rubbish out the other end. One of the things you should be asking yourself when looking to deploy AI is, what is my knowledge management situation like? Is it up to snuff? Because if it's not, you are setting yourselves off on the back foot. You're going to be behind on deadlines and it's not going to go the way you want it to. And with something like that as well, you will always have a spotlight on it and it can end up very badly for you.
Yeah.
So knowledge management, when we're talking about, right, how do I go about implementing AI in my contact center? Start with knowledge management.
Yeah.
100% of the time.
Yeah. And you know, there's a bunch of times that I'm sure you can speak to this more qualified than I am to talk about it. But you know, there's a bunch of stuff that's written down, that's processed, that's probably not been touched for a couple of years. There's the version that's the reality that all the agents are using because they know the process in their head and they've figured out a workaround to jig the system and get there. Well, that's not written down. So you've got the internal knowledge of policy, process, and those things. But then you've got the knowledge of customers and customer data, which is, I was giving the example to you guys earlier on when we were having coffee, that I'm working with a client at the moment that has a traditional travel agent type part of their business, and they have an elderly customer base that come in and book.
Yeah.
And the knowledge about that customer, the regular customer who books month in, month out, is held in the heads of the agents that are sat at that. It's not written down anywhere. It's not captured anywhere. And we can't expect people to write it down.
No.
But there's got to be a way that we can learn to start to extract some of that.
Well, let's use a football analogy because I think that's always an easy one to resonate with. Let's take the United element with you earlier. How much did United get screwed when both Ferguson and Gill left at the same time? So much knowledge left out the door with people that weren't prepared.
But they were still in the club. That's what really... I mean, I won't go into it.
But there are lots of those examples of when somebody leaves and... You know, there's an example like, you know, take another club like Liverpool. Somebody's left, Klopp's left. Last year, they won the league with the same team. You know, you could argue whatever you want about that. So there can be a false dawn that you think, oh, everything was okay.
Yeah.
And then there's a changing and there's a lack of information or there's a way that people used to do things. And I think you have this in organisations a lot. You know, people who have been there a long time have a way of doing things and are stuck in that way of doing things. And when they leave, that knowledge, that latent knowledge goes with them.
Liverpool are also, to be fair, I'm not a massive fan of Liverpool. Again, I'm not going to swear. But they're a really good example of how to use data in the right way and be a good first mover on that, especially relative to other Premier League clubs. If you look at the sort of heyday in the recent era under Klopp, data was behind so much of that as well.
Yeah. And I think, we know Sid touched on it in the last podcast that we had. Nice segue.
Thank you.
He was talking about the fact that they're using data so much in so many clubs, but you have those first movers and then you have those that follow and stuff. So, I mean, you're working a lot in contact centers and deploying technology. From your perspective, like the agent role, what are you seeing as the evolution of, you know, of 18-year-old Vinay Parmar sat in a call center taking a call and having his supervisor plugged in next to him versus to the world we are in today?
I think what we're seeing, particularly with technology, is the whole thing around empowering the agent or the advisor is it's just an expectation of young people these days. It's like they're so familiar, so comfortable with technology that actually you can give them access to a lot of stuff that they can benefit from. The whole thing around QA, QM, why not expose some of that to the individual so they can start to see some, you know, how well are they performing? You know, let them see some charts and things like that. That is just analyzing the way that they perform. So there's a lot around kind of self-improvement, which I'm seeing a lot of young people adopt really, really well.
Gamification comes in really nicely there, especially with the younger generations that grew up playing games like Sims or whatever. break it down into the stats for them. We've seen it work really well.
Exactly. So I think that element of it's pretty good. And then, I think the key thing here is I know what you mean by overwhelming an agent with too much data and information, but actually it's about surfacing what's relevant at that moment in time and not just bringing everything up. You've got your CRM here, and then you've got your knowledge sat on a website here, and then you've got knowledge maybe sat in a document somewhere else. There's a lot of data in all sorts of places, and you can genuinely get AI to learn from all of those different data touch points and just surface what's necessary, right?
Like just simple things like I'm trying to think of who this brand was, and I cannot remember for the life of me. I wish I could, because it was a really good example. I had called them, and then I called them again. And when I called them again, the agent, "Hi, Mr. Parmar, I can see you called this morning about this issue. Are you calling about this again?" I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. How do you get that?" Versus you call again, and there's no link between your contact and the one you made before, and you end up repeating yourself to an agent, or they've then got to go and search for it. So those timely things to just even nudge to go, "Hey, Iqbal's on the phone. Just he called this morning. You might want to use that in your conversation."
But it's also unifying that across your system. I've had it before with, again, I won't name them, but a telecommunications provider in the UK that used to sponsor Arsenal. But basically, I had a few issues with them that, again, I won't go into detail here, but basically they were enabling their core team in the UK to do that, but not the team that got outsourced. When I'm navigating that IVR, I shouldn't have to be able to. So I managed to get around it by pretending that I was at risk of leaving. So I knew they would have an escalation protocol and we should go to the UK team. I shouldn't have to do what I do for a living to know how to navigate that situation. And it's just getting it right.
I did the same. The little shortcuts that get you through. But it is, and an IVR is another great example of just something that's designed for the organization, not for the customer. It's just a way of gathering data and stats for what numbers customers press to get where they get, and then trying to palm them off. And a lot of the time they get routed to the same bloody team anyway.
Honestly, for me, just replace your IVR with a voice bot, but have a very purposeful voice bot that gets you through to the right person, not there just having a long blown conversation with you. Understand your intent and put you through to the right person. And
I was looking at this back. I think the last projects I was involved with when I was at in 2004, 5, we were looking at nuance, open natural language IVR. And I think Nationwide at the time also had something in the mix that was just, tell us what we can do for you, and you tell it and it figures it out. But it never got adopted as widely as I thought it would be. Maybe the technology just wasn't.
I think the data behind it and understanding intent's one thing, but actually getting to deliver a certain outcome is probably the hardest part. Has been.
It's the upkeep on it as well. With somewhere like that, it's the fact that people deploy it and thinking, okay, this will save us money here. No, you still need that headcount to actually service that. It's just, again, it's a role that's evolving.
And I guess it's the other thing as well. I was chatting to my nephew yesterday. He popped up and we were talking about Sora and this thing that's been released into the world to 1 million people to create these videos. But I think he said something like those videos cost £1 each to make. So that's not sustainable. And if you think about, maybe some of the prohibitive stuff was the cost of processing the data and information to get it
expensive.
It's expensive. And then you've got companies that have got ESG responsibilities and then want to have a neutral carbon footprint. And then they're like, well, actually, processing power, how much is it going to use? And so you get into all these complicated conflicts within your organization that spark up another interesting conversation for someone, not for us to do, for someone else to have. Someone else to have. Okay, so agents, AI, we've heard the phrase, it's not coming, it's already here, but we obviously touched on it's about the deployment, human-centered, and it being an enabler rather than a replacer at this stage in the journey.
Agreed.
Business case we've talked about, and that importance of that conversation and being able to connect those commercial dots across the different functions in your team, and really flipping the contact center to become that insight hub, that place of value where people go to ask the question, almost your Google search engine for your organization.
I was speaking to a CX leader recently for a company in Germany, a very philosophical view on AI. Actually, he was very pro AI, and the way they are as a business, they're leveraging AI to build more human connections. And what that means is they're getting AI to automate all the back end stuff, what happens under the hood, so that whilst people are having connections with one another and their customers, they don't need to go and do the admin afterwards, because AI is taken care of it. It's listened to the conversation, it's performed the actions that need to be done. So you can actually genuinely focus on building relationships.
100%.
And I think that's the real power of AI.
Reduction in after call work is probably the easiest example of, right, look, this is a very easy implementation you can do. It's not 100% perfect in the way it obviously transcribes, and you do need to actually look at that.
Yeah.
But it's a hell of a lot quicker than actually having to type that from scratch for every single agent.
Small wins like this.
I don't know about it. I mean,
Small wins.
It's transformed my discovery call with people, because you have the AI note taken in the background. I'm now fully focused,
totally engaged
on the conversation. Because I mean, it's not that I wasn't fully focused before. You're trying to be fully focused and make notes.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but my handwriting is terrible
When it comes back to cognitive load.
Yeah, because I'm trying to make these notes. It looks like my doctor's just written a prescription. I can't read it. And then I'm trying to remember what my client told me. But now we're able to have a really great conversation. I know the note taker's captured it, and I'm able to go back and precisely play back what was said in the conversation, and we can have a much better discovery call and get to the root of what we agreed faster.
Yeah.
We're not going away from the conversation with different memories about what was spoken about, and then coming back, well, I think you said this and I said this. Well, actually, this is what was discussed. So it's really transferred. So even running a small business, it's had that impact on me. So you scale that as at a contact center level, and it goes into your point about QA. Yes, great, you transcribe for the role of QA, but there's so much more opportunity that it presents, right?
Look at what you can do with that from a coaching perspective alone is fascinating.
Just your example around the elderly having conversations with that travel agency. I've been speaking to quite a lot of organizations that provide a physical touch point to their customers. That's the bit that's missing in terms of doing QA. So digitally how you're engaging, when somebody calls in, but what about that physical presence? And there are some solutions to this now, by the way. So we're looking at it.
And I'm just, as you're saying that, I'm thinking and going, well, if you're saying to customers, calls are recorded for training and monitoring purposes. Well, why isn't that conversation recorded for training and monitoring purposes?
There's some AI apps now that can feed into your QM and just have it on your mobile, and you're good to go.
You've seen our mate Sam Altman and their little medallion thing they've created, and Meta glasses and all this stuff coming through.
That's true.
That's going to enable
wearables.
that. We are in a world where it all can be caught, transcribed. Yes, you ask permission, go, is it okay to record this call? Great. That gives you the insight and the data and ability to capture those missing data points.
But even that, there's offline purposes for that as well. Like, look at John Lewis is quite a good example, actually, because they're not far from. I thought I was in Manchester then for a second. I realised I'm not in Manchester, I'm in Birmingham. So they're not far from me. They've got a contact centre based out of Wormsley where they actually overlooks the show floor as well, which is really nice. You can sort of see the two worlds combine a little bit there when it comes to approach to sort of customer quality care, especially with a brand like them that have such importance on loyalty, perceived value, customer engagement. There's so much you can go into there.
Well, look, we are kind of quickly running out of time. We've had a great conversation. So just as a quick wrap up, what's your key takeaway? If you could leave people listening to this podcast, watching it, what would be your key message for them to leave with today on the back of this?
Stop undervaluing yourself and what the role that contact centers provide in your organization. Like I say, for the first time, the power is in your hands. People want to get involved in this stuff. The data is the way to do it. You own all that data in your contact center. Use it for good. Actually put yourself on a pedestal. And like I say, leverage that leverage.
And Xander, if people want to find you, want to find Call Center Helper, what's the best way of getting in touch with you or getting to Call Center Helper?
Easiest way to do that is www.callcenterhelper.com. You can download our latest research on there, which is always very nice. We've got a whole series of webinars coming out as well, so feel free to get involved there. Alternatively, we've got very active LinkedIn communities, a 75,000 strong private community where you can ask Q&A, anything you want there, and get actual end user support on it, people that have done it. We've got a very active main LinkedIn page as well. And if you want to reach out to me or any of our other team members, we're all very active as well. So feel free to do it via LinkedIn or through the website.
We'll make sure we put the links in the description so people can tap on it and get through to you. But thank you so much for a great conversation. And thanks for making the trip from Manchester to Birmingham.
It's all good.
Thank you.
And look, the sun's out now.
Yeah,
told you.
No, it was. Yeah,
Maybe Siri was right.
Who knows? It could be awful in Alabama right now.
As always, guys, thank you for watching, listening. Please hit the subscribe button or bell, whichever platform you're on. Your support means everything to us. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. But for now, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Iqbal. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Cheers.